The Yellow Turban Rebellion was the jump-off point for the Three Kingdoms period, the opening act of the romance novel, and a natural response to the decadence, decay, and corruption of the Han Empire. Years of flooding, famine, and exploitation led peasants across China to rise up in revolt, destroying government offices, executing statesmen, and marching in the millions towards the way of peace. The emperor had lost his mandate of heaven, and the people would be the catalyst for change, or die in the attempt. Welcome, my friends, to Total War Three Kingdoms, where today, the last stronghold of the Yellow Turban Rebellion is surrounded, burning in the midday sun, as the coalition ends a long and bloody siege with an all-out assault on the walls. 50,000 people used to live here. Now, it's a ghost town and almost burned to the ground. The General of Heaven, Zhuge is dead, exhumed from his burial site with his head sliced from his rotting shoulders, but his teachings live on. The way of peace lives on, burning brightly, never to be extinguished by the corrupt Han coalition. Or, that's the hope anyway. We've got an all-star game with some of the biggest names in Three Kingdoms China. Liu Bei, Kong Ming, Cao Cao, Yuan Shao, and Sun Jian lead the coalition, while Wang Shao, He Yi, and Gong Du lead the vanguard for the Yellow Turbans. But if this populist revolt is to survive, it will first have to get through the Tiger of Jian. Much rides on this battle. For the coalition, the eventual schism of Wei, Wu, and Shu Han is in question, and should its leaders fall here, history will look quite a bit different. Catapults fire, yellow dragons are immolated, and the walls crumble under their righteous fury. Horns are blown, the charge is sounded, and 3,000 Han soldiers enter the breach, screaming. Strap in, ladies and gentlemen. It's gonna be a wild one. A return to classic Total War siege battles, if you will. An awesome layout, if not quite as pretty as it was before the siege began. With Siege Escalation 2, most of it has actually already burned to the ground. But Dong-e still has Yellow Turban defenders at her heart, and they will not fail their city. This is a Records Mode siege battle with Party Elite commanding the coalition, and your boy playing as the Yellow Turbans. And Records Mode means fatigue and combat are substantially different than what you'll see in Romance. Battles last longer, famous generals fight in bodyguard units instead of solo, there are no crazy abilities that let heroes cleave through dozens of men in a single strike, and fatigue and morale are very important to manage. The god-dang legend He-Man, holding in reserve alongside He Yi in the second layer of defense, should the first wall of defenders be pushed back, and across the way, the coalition is charging, and they're out for blood. On the northern side of the city are Yuan Shao and Sun Jian, leading the elite into battle. Jian's sword guard and a whole lot of militia also on their way to the breaches which cover the northern wall. At this point, you could call the city holy. And Liu Bei, with his most famous strategist Zhuge Liang. Kong Ming, waiting in reserve with a bunch of yellow dragons. 6 of them, in fact. Higher tier axe and shield infantry that pack a wallop in close quarters, but they don't have a lot of armor. And of course, we can never forget the founder of Wei Han, the cunning Cao Cao, commanding the cavalry in this fight near the camp on the western side of the city. So as this battle gets underway, Party Elite is going to send some of his vanguard deployed militia cav through the breach to maybe get some free charges into archers. But this small section of wall is one of the few places where towers actually still stand. Remember, it's Siege Escalation 2, which means most of the city and its defenses are already in ruins, but not so here. They're going to pay for that mistake with their lives, arrows pincushioning them, and sending their riders to an early grave. On the other side of the city, where the main assault is underway, G infantry holding the line, but militia cav are going to exploit the lighter sword infantry on the other gap, charging right through and creating some space for the elites that are about to charge in as well. Yellow Dragons, Yi Marksmen, are going to have flaming missiles that deal extra damage against light targets and lower enemy morale, but are weak against armor, and Protectors of Heaven are the main force here. Heavy glaive infantry that scare enemies are immune to fear and reflect enemy cavalry charge bonuses back at their attackers in a frontal charge when braced. So those in tandem are going to be pretty brutal to deal with, and Cao Cao making his move with the cavalry over on the western side, but Yellow Dragons taking a wallop from those catapults on the walls and already taking a ton of casualties early on. Cao Cao and the Cav are thinking about taking engagement, but there's an issue with that. Pei Yuan Shao is flanked by 2 units of Righteous Noble Heavy Axe Cav, and they are on a whole nother level than the mid and low tier horsemen Cao Cao brought to this battle, and they just realized that mistake, booking it the hell out of there now, but it might be too little too late. The trap is sprung, the gap is closed, and the Yellow Turban Elite are gonna feast on this rear guard, while Cao Cao makes good on his escape. Remember, he would rather betray the world than have the world betray him. letting some men die for him is no problem whatsoever. And friendly fire from the catapult even going to send a Yellow Turban horseman tumbling head over heels. But over here, the Yaosha heavy infantry and Yellow Turban infantry, the lower tier peasant units, are trying to hold the line as a bunch of militia and Jian sword guard charge through the gaps in their lines. And there are the Protectors of Heaven. Brutal glaive infantry, amongst the best troops in the game. They can go toe-to-toe with infantry, with cavalry, you name it. They are going to put you into an early grave, no questions asked. And some flames covering the oaks and elms that are dotting the city here. And we've got some of the G militia that just came back from routing. Not facing the right way, boys. Might want to turn around. You've got a lot of enemies behind you. They're going to get run over very soon. They will not trade well into any of the infantry over on this side. So the front ranks broke pretty quick, but the Yaosha are a very high-tiered Yellow Turban unit, and they are going to do what most of their defenders have not done so far, which is hold the line. And not just hold it, they're going to munch up pretty much all infantry that comes their way. They are brutal in CQB, and they're going to continue their rampage through not just the militia, but also the Jian sword guard and some of the mid and elite tier stuff that will be heading their way soon. So we'll keep an eye out on them, doing very well so far. Only lost one unit and killed dozens already. Yeah, they're definitely on the walls. You ain't wrong about that, playa. Cao Cao and Zhuge Liang are waiting and watching as their yellow dragons climb the walls here using grappling hooks, ass grappling hooks, which are better than ass ladders anyway, climbing up on top of the battlements and getting ready to receive the charge of the Yellow Turban defenders on that side. Looks like He Yi is retreating to the second layer of defense. A bunch of heavy crossbowmen firing across the canals here, and they're going to be able to do quite a bit of work as they do. Decent amount of AP. They also, I believe, have a missile block chance because of that huge shield on their back, and those are repeater crossbow units, so their rate of fire gonna be pretty good. And one thing you'll notice, whether it's single player or multiplayer, archers in Three Kingdoms are going to be super painful. Feels a lot like Shogun 2 in that regard. There are a lot of low tier infantry without a lot of armor or even a missile block chance, and the archers have crazy range and crazy rate of fire. So I think they're going to be a staple of both the multiplayer meta and campaign as well. They can get brutal. That focus fire is very impactful. But Protectors of Heaven, heavy G infantry, and some of the more elite tier armored stuff aren't really going to care too much about missile fire unless you manage to rack up some damage on them first. Yaosha still killing the game over near the breaches on the northern side of the city, and Liu Bei looking to reclaim his status as Han Emperor. Got a lot of pent-up ambition as a descendant of the emperors of old, and hounding for some glory as he charges into the teeth of the Yellow Turban defense, surrounded by elite bodyguard to be sure. But Pei Yuan Shao and the Righteous Noble Heavy Axe Cav are right there, actually caught unawares by the ballsiness of that charge, but that's still 1 against 3, and he didn't get the cleanest charge off anyway. Future leader of Shu Han, gonna want to be careful here. Nothing else even close to coming into support yet, and actually getting a strike in general to general, mace versus dual sword. Liu Bei and Pei Yuan Shao going at it. Really cool. Then he's gonna get shoved out of the way and might look to retreat because in a prolonged engagement, not sure he can survive. Here, looks like Yellow Dragons completely surrounding Yellow Turbans on the walls, but that should be a very long fight. Again, it's records mode, and only a handful of units on each side actually engaging at any given time. It's not the full unit fighting, just a handful of guys on each side of the battlement there. So that fight might take a while, but Sun Jian, Yuan Shao, and a lot of the elite tier stuff have pushed through. Yi marksmen are grouping up, and a little bit blobbed up actually. Crossbows getting some good shots into them. If they spread out a bit, they should be able to trade relatively well in those missile fights, and a brutal fight for the stairs in this second layer of defense. Looks like the Protectors of Heaven are trying to push through alongside some of their Yellow Dragon companions, but that fight on the stairs is absolutely vicious. Fire arrows and crossbow bolts crisscrossing the gap between the armies, and Liu Bei getting caught out here, killed on the charge, and the leader of Shu Han dead, and the first major casualty of this battle. Sun Jian looking on, kind of licking his lips, doesn't mind too much, maybe chuckling under his breath, He knows Liu Bei will one day become a big rival, and that's another rival that he won't have to worry about into the future now. And Kong Ming, probably pretty pissed off about it. He's his chief strategist, although at this point, around 184, I'm not sure that he had taken over that role quite yet. I could be wrong. I think it was a little bit later, after the Yellow Turban Rebellion, that Kong Ming decided to become part of that whole strategy empire. But I could be mistaken. Feel free to let me know. Either way, it looks like a lot of the attackers are streaming down these streets and getting further inside the city. Protectors of Heaven rushing forward, trying to defend those that remain of Liu Bei's bodyguard, but he is dead, so there's no getting him back at this point. The strategist still alive, and Cao Cao has been, I think, completely forgotten about over here. He's not in a good spot. He's actually sitting in front of an arrow tower, and he just went down to a shot to the head, a bolt piercing his neck and the neck of his horse, and he goes down. That's the second major casualty of this battle, and again, Sun Jian probably pretty happy about that one as well. You know Yuan Shao is. They do not like each other very much. Part of the coalition, but there's a lot of interpersonal rivalries going on, and with Cao Cao out of the picture, another general falls. He was completely forgotten about there. Kind of makes sense though, right? We're playing 40 unit cap. It's not that embarrassing to forget about a unit when you've got so many troops and such a huge battlefield to micro. I wouldn't worry too much about it, but still a big loss for the attackers regardless. The balance bar is still heavily in their favor. Remember, as this battle started, they outnumbered the defenders by 800 troops, and that has only widened as the battle progressed. The early stages of it certainly went the way of the attackers, but with two generals down on the coalition side of things, maybe a little bit more of a shift towards the Yellow Turbans. Now, one of the things you'll notice about a lot of elite tier infantry in this game is they actually are very versatile and usually fill multiple battlefield roles. So you just saw the Bringers of Righteousness there. They're a glaive and archer hybrid that do well from range and in melee, and can even form a formation that allows their back ranks to fire while their front ranks use their glaives and protect the back rank of archers. So they are very versatile, can be very good in both roles, and here in a late stage siege battle, that can be incredibly beneficial because they get to use all their ammunition and still protect themselves in melee if cavalry decides to charge them. The Yaosha are still mulching stuff at that front battlement. They're still fighting. The only unit still left on that side of the battlefield. And here, some more Yellow Turbans are holding out, trying to push back those Yellow Dragons. And again, we'll take a look at the Cao Cao bodyguard unit that was completely forgotten about. Just an ignoble death there. A sad one for sure. Bolts to the neck, dropping the horse, dropping the rider, and Meng De just out of the fight completely. Poor guy. Would like to see him in melee here, but the rest of the guys, Sun Jian, Zhuge Liang, and Yuan Shao, still around and getting some nice charges as well. But Pei Yuan Shao and those elite tier axe cavalry are definitely doing a number on the Yellow Dragons. Some pretty powerful charges on their way in, and in sustained melee, very brutal. I think cavalry will also be very impactful in this game. The higher tier elite stuff like the Jade Dragons are mean when they get their charge bonus off, and entire infantry units can kind of get deleted by it if you manage to get a nice rear charge off. And they're going to do so here to some of the versatile hybrid units, the Bringers of Righteousness, feeling the wrath of some of the coalition cavalry, and the Protectors of Heaven charging forward, and they are about to make their presence felt for sure, because the cavalry can't get anywhere near them without getting mulched through. So, Yuan Shao escaping from He Yi and some of the other bodyguards. He-Man trying to close him down in melee. Yuan Shao now in a bad position. He's going to need some reinforcements from those halberds, from those G infantry, and from the glaives as well. If not, that mace could thunk into the side of his helmet and drop him, and they cannot afford to be losing too many leaders at this point. They've already lost two. Zhuge Liang running from the field as well, but they've got a lot of infantry left that's still streaming towards the central capture point. But it's a battle of morale at this point. They've got the numbers, but do they have the leadership? Kong Ming has had enough. Yuan Shao and Sun Jian will have to be the heroes of the day. Certainly more iconic and likely more powerful bodyguard units than those of the final boss Wang Shao or any of the Yellow Turbans, who have been holding it down at the final capture plaza with the venerable Wu, dual sword infantry with poison, and Chanters with the Sacred Chance passive that grants 10% additional armor, AP, and weapon damage in an AoE, but they're as yet unblooded for the most part and completely fresh, which is why holding reserves is pretty important in records mode, honestly. Killing elite troops who are fresh in the late game with exhausted ones is going to be a tall order, but not impossible with some good flanking and surrounds. Attackers starting to lose some steam here. Archers getting charged in the front by He-Man and the powerful bodyguard cavalry for the Yellow Turbans. It looks like pretty much all bodyguard units in records mode are going to be cavalry units, which I think it would have been cool if they kind of switched that up a bit. I don't know, I haven't been through all of them yet, but it'd be nice to see some more, like if there were some that were in glaive infantry, some that were in archers, not all of them in heavy cav units, but we'll see how it goes. There might be a reason for that, I don't know. Here we've got Jian cycle charging into the glaive infantry and some of the swordsmen as well. Glaives got to be careful around them, but against swords for sure, going to mulch them up every time they charge in. And Jian, the Tiger of Jiandong, definitely gonna kill it as he flashes that Imperial seal and says, "Hey, don't you know who I am? Time to die, motherlickers." And he's gonna stab them a bit and watch as many of those swordsmen die around him. Yuan Shao into the thick of it now too, fighting the Bringers of Righteousness, and he is in a scary position because those are glaives. They got a border force cav, and that's what happens when you fight elite tier glaive infantry when you're exhausted. You die, and look at that horse. It actually crumbled on top of him, landed on his body, and buried him under the weight of 1 ton of horse meat. Dang. Yuan Shao with a brutal death, smushed by his own mount. What an awesome end for a character that I think a lot of people don't like very much. At least I remember in Dynasty Warriors, he was kind of memed pretty heavily. Poor guy dies there, and the Coalition is crumbling at this point. Protectors of Heaven charging in. To be fair, I feel like a lot of characters were made into memes in Dynasty Warriors. It's one of the silliest games I've ever played. I love it. But the voice acting and stuff is absolutely glorious. Top tier for sure. Protectors of Heaven charging in. Guy in front took a bunch of bolts to the face and crumbles into the dirt. The rest of them make it in there. And glaive versus glaive. Protectors of Heaven would definitely win that fight in a prolonged one. Problem is, they have no support from their leadership whatsoever. All their leaders are dead now, except Sun Jian, actually. I think he's the only one still standing in the entire coalition. Kong Ming routed. He's still alive, but he's off the field. And that means bad news bears for all the attackers. And what was a brutal, torrid, and bloody affair is going to end with the coalition faltering, failing, and running for the hills. And one thing you will notice, a lot of bodyguard units are actually unbreakable. Apparently Sun Jian's are not. Cao Cao's bodyguard unit is unbreakable. I'm not actually sure why he's running and some others don't. I don't know why the Tiger of Jiandong would have a worse bodyguard unit than Cao Cao, but maybe there's a reason for that. I'm not sure, but a lot of them are unbreakable, and Huang Shao will give chase and try to bring him down and jack that Imperial seal before this battle ends. He-Man, I say, hey, what's going on? Yeah. Amazing. I mean, I think He-Man might be my favorite character in Yellow Turbans, for sure. I think he's the subordinate of Yi. He's not one of the characters you can start a campaign with, but he is one of those that you can kind of grab and control early on as one of your secondary generals. But look at the kill counts here. Almost 6,000 troops on the field, and very, very torrid affair as we saw numbers on both sides get diminished repeatedly and brutally. I'm really not sure why the post-battle stat screen doesn't say units killed, units lost, and units fielded. I feel like that's information that every single post-battle stat screen ever in Total War should always have. But at least we can see the individual unit kills. Gong Du killing the game with 190, his crossbows as well, making a huge impact. Pei Yuan Shao and his cavalry each close to 100, and Yuan Shao, 234. One of the highest kill counts in the game. Amazing, and a really fun siege battle. Hope you guys enjoyed the Yellow Turbans. See you next time. Peace.